If you've ever dreamed of starting a business from the ground up, you probably stopped dead in your tracks right after calculating those massive, intimidating startup costs. I mean, the barriers to entry for most ventures are just incredibly high, right? But welcome everyone to this explainer, where we're going to dive into a truly fascinating blueprint. We're looking at a business model with a remarkably low barrier to entry, the independent real estate agency. Today, we're unpacking exactly how everyday people can transition from having just a tiny bit of savings to generating a real, sustainable, recurring income. We'll be pulling some highly specific numbers from our source material to map out exactly how an ambitious entrepreneur can go from basic seed capital to consistent, high-margin commission.
Okay, so here's how this blueprint unfolds today. First, we'll look at the used car premise. Then we'll break down your startup capital, look at monthly operating costs, chart out the path to profit, and finally wrap up with a much-needed reality check.
Let's just jump right into Section 1, the used car premise.
I want you to focus on this very specific number, $1,750. Now, in the grand scheme of starting, say, a traditional brick-and-mortar business, that amount is practically a rounding error. If you're opening a restaurant or a retail shop, you're usually looking at 50 to 100 grand just to turn the lights on. But out in the real world, for everyday people, $1,750 is roughly the cost of a decent, reliable used car. You know, a basic Honda Civic or a Toyota Corolla. Keep that benchmark in the back of your mind, because understanding the actual purchasing power of that specific amount totally sets the stage for the financial philosophy we're about to explore.
The source material brilliantly uses this used car analogy to highlight a massive shift in mindset. It's about moving from being a consumer to becoming an investor. The premise is essentially this. Instead of taking that cash and spending it on a used car today, what if you deployed it as seed capital for a real estate business? It's about building a model that, if you execute it correctly, could generate enough profit to let you buy a car every single year. You're shifting away from a one-time depreciating purchase, and instead you're building a recurring revenue engine. This is literally the magic of leverage, using a very small, accessible amount of money to create a completely new reality for yourself.
Moving right along to Section 2, let's talk about your startup capital. So when you actually break down the cash required to get this off the ground, it's kind of mind-blowing how lean this startup phase is. There's no heavy machinery, no massive warehouse full of inventory. Your biggest single expense? It's your listing binder and marketing materials at around $140. And why is that? Because in this industry, presentation is everything. It's what builds immediate trust with your clients. Then you've got a basic printer for about $105, which you absolutely need for generating physical contracts on the fly. Branding and signage will run you roughly $70, and you'll spend about the same on your local business license and registration to make sure everything's compliant. Add in a modest $35 for internet. Now, assuming you already own a basic laptop and you've got your first month's small office space rent and deposit covered, your total starting working capital comes out to only around $525 to $550. That is astonishingly accessible. It completely democratizes the whole concept of entrepreneurship.
Okay, now that our doors are theoretically open, let's hit Section 3. Monthly operating costs. We all know the survival of any new business usually comes down to its overhead, right? Well, snappily running through this ledger month to month, your heaviest lift in this model is a shared or micro-office rent at just $105. From there, your expenses are incredibly marginal. You're looking at $35 dedicated to ongoing marketing and ads to keep your pipeline fresh. Another $35 covers the gas you'll need for client property visits and showings. Then, it's just $18 for basic utilities and another $18 for general office supplies. Tally all that up, and your total monthly overhead sits at a remarkably low $210. Seriously, contrast that $210 with a restaurant owner who's sweating over thousands of dollars in spoiled inventory, heavy payroll, and massive commercial leases. With this blueprint, your risk exposure is so tightly contained, you can actually sleep at night.
So with our costs nicely contained, let's move to Section 4, the path to profit. How are we actually making money here? The source lays out a very clear, actionable target. If we assume a standard 1% commission on a typical entry-level home price in this market context, an average deal yields about $350. Step 1 is closing just 4 sales a month. That brings in roughly $1,400. Step 2 is closing 4 rental deals a month, which tacks on another $350. Step 3 simply combines those efforts, getting you to a gross revenue of $1,750 each month. What I love about this is the focus on small, consistent wins that compound over time. We aren't talking about hunting down one multi-million-dollar mansion. It's about the everyday hustle of securing 4 sales and 4 rentals every 30 days. Breaking it down into a clear, mathematical target makes revenue generation feel totally approachable.
And this is exactly where the magic of low overhead truly shines. When you contrast that tiny $210 monthly operating cost against your newly generated $1,750 in revenue, you are left with a staggering 88% profit margin. That means $1,540 is literally dropping straight to your bottom line every single month as pure profit. You aren't taking a massive cut to pay back suppliers or angel investors. Because your operating costs are so phenomenally low, your effort directly and immediately enriches your own bank account. Now, scaling this up over a full year reveals the real potential of this blueprint. A baseline year yields somewhere in the range of $16,000 to $18,000 in pure profit. Going back to our initial premise, that easily affords that solid used car with plenty of room to spare. But if you inject aggressive networking, exceptional client service, and genuine hustle into this model, agents can push that annual profit way up toward $45,000 to $48,000 a year. The ceiling here isn't dictated by factory output caps or inventory limits. It is dictated entirely by your connections and your drive to build real relationships in your community.
Which brings us to the crucial final step of our analysis today, Section 5, the reality check. We have got to slow down and be incredibly honest with ourselves right now. The math on a spreadsheet is pristine and perfect. But reality? Reality is often messy and emotionally taxing. Real estate is fundamentally a trust-based game. Think about it. Nobody is going to hand over the keys to their biggest financial asset to a complete stranger without hesitation. Because of that, your location and your existing network matter immensely. If you're starting fresh in a brand new city, you have to build those bridges from absolute scratch. Plus, those first 2 to 3 months are notoriously slow. The 90-day grind of cold calling, marketing, and building a client base requires some profound emotional resilience. The math is easy, but gaining the trust required to actually execute that math, that is where the actual hard work lies.
Because of all that initial friction, you are inevitably going to hear conflicting advice. People will tell you it's too competitive, or they'll say it's easy money. But the source material offers a brilliant rule of thumb here. The people who will really tell you the truth are the ones already doing it. Honestly, don't ask your friends or family who have never sold a house. If you want to know if this highly structured financial payoff is truly achievable for you in your specific market, you need to talk to the agents who are already out there in the trenches every single day. Their insight is going to be your ultimate reality check.
So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to consider for your own entrepreneurial journey. You've seen the remarkably low barrier to entry, that minimal $210 monthly overhead, and the incredibly clear mathematical path to an 88% profit margin. But you've also seen the reality of that intense initial grind. So ask yourself, is the slow, upfront grind of building trust and forging a network worth the potential of a near pure profit, $48,000 annual payoff? That is ultimately for you to decide. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this blueprint gives you a powerful new perspective on what it actually takes to build a sustainable business from scratch.